Okay, I get it. You want to get into the Bible. So you start at Genesis. You start at Genesis 1. Everything's going great. It sounds fantastic. But then you get into Genesis 2 and you think, wait a minute, this feels contradictory. This is not adding up. I want to get into this and why it doesn't add up. I want to get into this way deeper so that you can understand the Bible. You can understand what's happening. And my name is Craig, and this is Morning Star Quest, where we are journeying through the Bible one question at a time. And the question today is, it's a tricky one, or at least it seems like it's a tricky one. And when it comes down to it, the atheists have put together this list. There was 439 contradictions or supposed contradictions in the Bible. They say this is the thing that is going to stop you from reading the Bible. And there are so many. And, when I get down to it, let me just put this back on. Number 11 is today's, the 2 contradictory creation accounts.
You're doing great so far, Craig.
Thank you.
When you're ready to pick back up, you might dive into the heart of the issue by saying something like, today we're tackling one of those supposed contradictions, the difference between Genesis 1 and 2. It's easy to see why some people get confused, but by the end of this video, you'll see that these chapters aren't contradictory. They actually complement each other in a powerful way.
All right. Well,
feel free to continue when you're ready.
All right. Well, let's get into this, because let's just start with Genesis 1, 25 to 27. Can you just read that out so we can just see the difference of those two things?
Sure thing. Genesis 1, 25, 27. 25, God made the wild animals according to their kinds.
Animals.
The livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds.
All right, animals and creatures.
And God saw that it was good. 26. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. 27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. This passage highlights the orderly creation of animals and humans, emphasizing humanity's role in ruling over creation. Now let's compare this to Genesis 2 when you're ready.
All right, well, let's go Genesis 2, verses 18 to 22. And just note the different order.
Sure, here's Genesis 2, 18 and 22. Genesis 2, 18, 22, 18. The Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him.
So
19.
Man.
Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky.
Now
he brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky and all the wild animals. But for Adam no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. 22nd, then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. In this passage, the creation sequence is more focused on the specific relationship between man and woman, with animals being created and named by Adam, but the creation of woman happens afterward, emphasizing her as a companion for Adam. This sequence feels different from Genesis 1, where humans are created simultaneously after the animals. These differences can seem contradictory, but they actually serve different narrative purposes. Let's explore that next.
All right. Well, see, this is the thing, is that obviously we have a different order. In Genesis 1, we have, animals, man, and then woman. And they created them. And then in Genesis 2, it is like man, animals, woman, and it just does feel like a different order, but
exactly. The order in Genesis 1 is animals, then humans, both male and female, while in Genesis 2 it's man first, then animals, and finally woman. This difference in sequence can be confusing.
All right.
But it's important to understand that these chapters are written with different focuses.
Now
Genesis 1 gives a broad, structured account of creation, emphasizing the creation of the world and humanity as a whole. In contrast, Genesis 2 zooms in on the creation of humans in a more detailed and relational way, particularly focusing on the relationship between man and woman. These aren't contradictory accounts, they're complementary. Genesis 1 is like the big picture, while Genesis 2 offers a closer look at the personal relationship God has with humanity. Understanding this can really help you move past that initial confusion and see the deeper meaning behind these passages. What do you think? How does this shift your perspective?
I find it very interesting that in books, that in movies, that in stories, that in everything we say, they're always written for a different perspective. Now, it might be that, let's just take World War One or something. There are so many different stories, but they're all different perspectives. They might contradict each other or feel like they contradict each other with the story that they're telling, but it might be a different perspective from one side to the other, to one person to the other. And I find it so interesting that we do this in stories all the time, but the
Just
Bible
like in
can't.
books or movies, different perspectives can add depth and richness to a story, even if they seem to contradict at first glance. Each account can highlight different aspects of the same event. In the case of Genesis, it's similar. Genesis 1 gives us the big cosmic picture of creation, while Genesis 2 brings us into the intimate personal relationship between God and humanity. These perspectives aren't at odds, they're just different ways of telling the same story. This actually strengthens the overall narrative, showing us both the grandeur of God's creation and his close, caring relationship with us. It's like getting to see the same event from multiple camera angles. Each one adds something valuable. So, how does this understanding help you when you approach the Bible? Does it make you see these chapters in a new light?
Well, yes. And I guess it gives me the knowledge that these things have been told from different perspectives. So it's like you said, it's zoomed out for Genesis 1, but then it zooms in and just retells the story in a different way. It's kind of like if there was a hospital just built, and if you ask the architect about that hospital, you'll get a very different story and a very different order of things than if you asked a doctor or if you asked the very first patient. Very different stories, but they're the same story. They're the same thing from different angles.
The architect might focus on the design and construction process.
Exactly.
How everything was planned and built step by step. Meanwhile, the doctor would emphasize the hospital's functionality and how it serves patients, while the first patient might share a deeply personal experience of receiving care there. Each perspective tells the truth, but from a different angle and with different details highlighted. Genesis 1 is like hearing from the architect, seeing the grand design and structure of creation. Genesis 2 is more like hearing from the first patient, focusing on the personal, relational aspects, especially the creation of humans and their interaction with God. When you approach the Bible with this understanding, it helps you appreciate the richness of its narratives. Rather than seeing these accounts as conflicting, you can view them as complementary, each providing unique insights into God's creation and his relationship with humanity. Does this analogy help clarify how these chapters fit together?
Absolutely. And I find it so interesting. We are up to number 11 with all of these contradictions, and so far each and every contradiction just turns out to be just a complementary, or it's telling the story, but we're just not getting it with the two verses. And then we read a verse before it, and it just opens everything up and we understand it. And it's like, well, these aren't contradictions. Now, you might think that there are more contradictions, so I'm going to go through them one at a time. As I said, there's 439, and over here, no, over there, we have another one. And Contradiction Tuesday, every Tuesday, we're going to go through a contradiction, and we're going to see if it is a contradiction. Go to something awesome and forgotten, and I'll catch you in the next one.